Before we get started, let me just throw this out to you real quick. There is our daily Bible reading for this week. If you need to take a picture of that, go ahead and do that. I think it also came in the Friday email. That's Josh Morris doing that. Thank you. I think he's teaching downstairs, but Jessica has printed out all of those things, and our young girls, high school girls, I think, are going to be responsible for doing that. So when you show up on Sunday morning, if you don't have a plan, there's the daily Bible reading, and it's Genesis 7 and Luke 3. You're not so far behind yet that you can't catch up and get it done. So best thing any of us can do is just be in the Word a little every day. Anything that we need to say family-wise, announcements before we have a prayer? Do you have an update on James? No? Who's yelling over here?
He's back at Friendship Village.
He's back there?
He discharged him. They said there was no real signs of sepsis or infection. There wasn't a real need to keep him there. Most of his ailments are just age-related. He's just having a tummy Christmas back. He can't treat it with medicine.
Yeah.
He's searching for the medicine that can treat him, but there aren't many. So he's back at Friendship.
All right.
Also for Patty, she's back home and she's waiting on her home health care.
Okay. The others? All righty. Well, Tim, would you like to say the prayer for us, please?
Heavenly Father, thank you for opening our eyes this morning, allowing us to see another beautiful day that you've made. Thankful for the blessing that it is to assemble with our church family here. Father, we look forward to this new year. Thank you for all the blessings that you bestowed upon us this past year. Help us, Father, this new year to become more fervent in our study, more fervent in our faith, and always do things that will bring people closer to you. We pray all these things in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen. All right. So today is the start of a new class. We're going to do the problem of evil and suffering on Sundays and Wednesdays from now all the way through March, so the first quarter. And I think that a lot of the things that we're going to do in this class are probably things that you've heard somewhere along the road in the last 13 years. I've had, what happened originally, this is where I learned about this subject. I was in a class in 2002 with Phil Roberts on the book of Job. And obviously within Job, you're going to talk about the problem of evil and suffering. And that's where I was introduced to this subject. It's 2002. And from that time, I've done lessons, I've done classes. Chad just finished teaching evidences to the high school class. And if you're going to do evidences, there's always, like, if you pick up an evidences book, let's just say you pick up a book, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Any evidences book, you're going to have normal evidences like philosophical stuff, reasons for God, resurrection stuff, reasons to believe that Jesus was raised from the dead. And then you're going to come to the end. It's always organized in this way. And at the end, there's always going to be, what about this, what about this, what about this? And the problem of evil is always on that list, always, in almost every evidences book, at least that's big enough to talk about a lot of subjects. The problem of evil and suffering is one. And the reason why it's inside of evidences is because this is number 1 of 3. I've got 3 reasons why I'm doing this. Number 1, well, I guess number 1 is what I said. I asked the elders, and they indulged me on this. I would like to, it's such a big subject, I would like to be able to package all of my stuff together in one spot, rather than having a bunch of stuff from 2002 to now, and lots of sermons and lots of classes. Let's just put it together in a spot where we talk about it. That's number one. Number two is because this is only an opinion. It'll be different for every one of us, I think. But my opinion is the problem of evil and suffering is the most powerful and the most argument against God, or against being a Christian, a follower in any way. And so, you know, there's lots of arguments that come up, and most of the time some of those are just excuses. This one's got some meat to it, though. And so, you know, let's talk about it. Let's put it together. And then number three is kind of what we're going to start with today. It's the idea about being prepared. In fact, that's what my subject for today is, getting ahead of the problem, being prepared for this thing. The first part of this class, I want to talk about the logical problem of evil. I'm talking about this 3-month class. The logical problem of evil. And that's just like sorting through a math equation. 1 + 1 = 2. If God is all powerful and God is all good and evil exists in the world, then how does that math equation work out? It's just working through. That's the logical thing. Understanding the nature of God and why bad things happen. And you know, also there's easy answers to some of this stuff. I don't want to do any of that. I want to talk about it and do some real substance. So we'll do the logical problem. But reason number 3 for doing this class is because there's the logical problem of evil, but then there's the real problem of evil. And the real problem of evil is not a math equation. It's, I just got diagnosed with cancer. Why would God let this happen to me? You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's not... Why? But maybe it's not. It's not. I just got diagnosed with cancer. It's somebody very close to me that I love just has this problem. I lost my job. A tsunami wiped out 300,000 people in Indonesia. Like, what? How can this be God's world when stuff like this happens? And that's not a logical problem. That's a heart problem. And it's a real problem, but it's a heart problem whenever you start to question, how could God allow this? Why would God allow this? How is this possibly His world where everything is supposed to be under His control? And, you know, Job loses everything that he has and all of his kids, and it messes with people. Bad, like that really messes with people. So that's the introduction, the problem of evil, what we intend to do for the next 3 months. I want to just stop at this point and like open floor. Problem of evil and suffering, because here's the first part of one of the things that I want to do in this class. I think that I've got more notes than we can actually cover in each of the classes. But I'm willing to let those notes go for the sake of real practical conversation. This class is only going to be as effective as it possibly can be if we're all willing to talk about it and share. So as we think about the problem of evil and suffering, like anything on your mind, anything that you want to bring up or talk about just in the introduction, questions that you would like to think about, or any experiences maybe that you have walked through with other people or maybe yourself?
I have a question kind of about the scope. Whenever this topic comes up with someone, they often categorize it into the suffering that happens when God is a bystander, and why does He not intervene? But then it very quickly transitions to, what about the suffering that is directly caused by God? Things like the flood. Is that under this conversation?
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is the first question that you say about what about God as a bystander, like that, I think that question is, how could God possibly be all good and all powerful and this be his world and everything's under his control, and still these things happen? That's going to go in the first logical half, where we're going to have to talk about, listen, there's only a handful of you here who are going to enjoy the first couple weeks of this. Everybody else, just go ahead and put your seatbelt on, because it's going to be awesome. That's what I think. You know, there's a lot of, we're going to have to, like what you're talking about right now, we're going to have to talk about Augustine and what Augustine introduced about why does evil happen and how does God allow it to happen. Then we're going to have a major section on the second half, like the second 2/3 of this class, which is where we're just going to start to identify different reasons for bad things. Sometimes God causes bad things to happen. Like Ananias and Sapphira stole and lied, and God said, I'm going to strike you dead. That is a direct action of God. Sometimes it may not be a direct action of God. I'm just driving down the road and I get hit by a drunk driver, and it's somebody else's sin that causes me to die. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put together a list of reasons why we know bad things happen and try and understand that list. But here's what's going to be hard about that list. We can know all the reasons that we can find in the Scripture, but also we're going to have to remember this. Job never got to know the reason. Like Job never knew which one it was. We may know all the options, but we may not know why I'm suffering right now. But I think it will help to at least have an understanding of the options. So yes, those two things are both covered in a lot of depth. Dave, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say that this is the theological side that people struggle with God. But then there's the other side of the world and what the world is preaching, simply suggesting that pain, period, is the enemy. And so we have to view everything that is painful as something to avoid. So work is thought to be painful, so we need to get away from work and long for the weekend. We need to get away from the pain of family, and so there's problems that need medicated, or raising children, or things like that. I'm not negating the medical necessities that are needed, but that's one of the evangelistic efforts that the world, or Satan, the deceiver, suggests, is that pain is the
Yeah.
but it's not fully the end.
That's right. And not only that, but maybe to some extent it is the enemy, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. We just talked about the Father's discipline in Hebrews 12, and we're going to have to talk about the refining fire as we go through this, like walking through the fire to be better on the other side.
I struggle with this. Sin plays a big role in this, okay? Because I firmly believe that a lot of suffering is self-inflicted. And a big chunk of it caused by our own sin. That's my opinion. I'm not going to force that on anybody else. But I don't know if that's going to be covered in this quarter at all. I surely hope.
That's going to be next Wednesday, this Wednesday. The very first thing that we're going to have to talk about is, where do bad things come from in the first place? And the answer is Genesis 3 and sin. So right on. But you get to the second 2/3 of this where it's like, but why did I just lose my job? Am I being punished by God, or is this just a product of living in a sinful world? And so there's both of those things are a part of what we're going to talk about here. Like, let's talk about the first part, sin is the ultimate problem. Let's talk about the second part, the why, and all of that. Good. Thank you. Any others before we get started? Yep.
On the heels of our Hebrews class, but this problem of evil and suffering, when we are going through suffering and the hard times like you were talking about at the front, it's often easy for us to draw into ourselves and not be around anybody else. And I think that compounds the issue and the problem sometimes is when you're going through those hard times and you pull yourself inward and you don't allow yourself to be around other Christians or other people who can lift you up out of that sometimes. Anyway, I think these two kind of go hand in hand with what we had just finished talking about.
So Mark, this is not exactly right for me to say that this class is going to be divided into thirds. If you want to do thirds, it could be like January, February, March. That might be how you think about this class. But this is basically the way that my outline is laid out. Jay asked me, "Can I see a syllabus?" And I said no, because I'll tell you what's coming to the best of my knowledge, but it's going to change from week to week. Like your conversation and how much we get accomplished, I've got a roadmap so that I can get done what I want to get done, but I don't know exactly how it's going to play out. But basically thirds. The logical problem of evil will be the first third, let's say January, where we're just going to think through the nature of God and how could God let this happen. That's going to be the first thing. The second thing is going to be reasons for suffering. What do we know? And we're going to look through those different reasons. Mark, the third third of this, the last section of this class is going to be, what do I do whenever this happens? What do I do personally? What do we do as people who are involved in other people's suffering? And so we'll talk about lamenting, and we'll talk about walking with other people through the fire, instead, like go outward, not inward. We'll talk about, that's in the last third. Yep.
I think you'd identified these different types of evil. Like there was the self-inflicted, or like what Bob's talking about, evil due to somebody else's sin, the drunk driver. But then, like you also mentioned, the idea of the tsunami killing. It's like you have to have a different approach to each type. Is that kind of something that you're going to do in class as well? Because I can handle the idea, oh, somebody else's sin caused this terrible thing to happen. I can forgive. Like there's certain things you can work through, but how do you work through that idea that some natural situation happens?
That's even the word. There's two different kinds of evil. In the logical section, there's moral evil and natural evil. And natural evil is like, Joseph Stalin killed millions of people and we don't even have any idea. Like you can put that square on, he's a bad person and this is why it happened. Why did the earthquake, kill all of those people, or the tornado or the volcano or something like that? That seems like that one's on God. So we'll at least have to think through it, but we're going to try and have categories and think through it in an orderly and reasonable way. Yeah, that's good. Let me ask you one other question. I'll come to you here, but here's the next question that I want to throw out. Just, does anybody know anybody who has had this problem, and maybe you've watched it shake their faith, and maybe you've watched them lose their faith because of this problem? Think about that question. Go ahead here.
Well, I was thinking sometimes things that are painful in the moment and seem like maybe it was evil, actually it turns out to be a blessing later when you see it until you get past the painful part.
That's right. I don't talk about this too often, but I got into a car wreck one time. The point of impact, I'm not talking about like the speeds involved. I'm talking about they had to do a reconstruction. The point of impact, like after the skid marks, was 76 miles an hour. I was going really fast. That crash stunk in a lot of ways. That crash, I think, ultimately led to me being here. And so it's like, okay, I think that I asked somebody not long ago, I won't say his name because he's connected to this congregation. He got in a crash, and the crash led through a long series of events, and I said, that was a horrible thing. You almost died. Would you think of it, though, as a blessing? And he said, absolutely, 100%. Changed everything. And it's like, wow, that's great. Perspective is everything, right? Okay, one more.
You asked, has this ever been a stumbling block for someone? And it very well might be. And I think it's a very genuine problem that we talked about. But just from my own experience, every single person that I've talked to about religious things that has brought this up as a real issue has used it as an excuse or something they want to point to, when in reality, they just don't want to change their behavior, or don't want to change their life, or they know the truth, and yet they just don't want to accept it. And so this is the fun thing they can point to and be like, well, why would I want to worship God anyways when he, lets bad things happen? But that's not the real stumbling block. Their heart is already hard. This is just the thing that I can point the finger at.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to do like two different things with that. One is, yes, I've even got that in my notes this morning. Here's what somebody says. Probably here's what's really happening, but here's what someone says. But at the same time, okay, well, let's at least address what they say. Like, it might just be an excuse, but I want an answer for it. And sometimes it is a legitimate problem. All right, so let me start with this. How about this? Has anybody ever had to take an ethics class in school of any kind? So let's do a couple different ones here real quick. Benny, was yours medical ethics?
Yeah.
What's that? Tell me about that.
They went through different case studies of events in history where the medical establishment did something to a group of people, and they knew or they didn't know, and this was the outcome. And was it ethical? And
So why would you need to know about that in a class? Like what you have to take this class to get to where you are. Why is that something that you need to know about?
well, I would say it would be so we don't repeat history, but I still see it today. In medicine, every day.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really look like we really.
Yeah, so it's kind of here's a difficult situation. We could go this way, we could go this way, but with the benefit of hindsight, this way is not good, this way is good. Let's not go the bad way. Like, let's think through it ahead of time. I've been over here for a second. I saw more hands over here, but anyone over here raise their hand up? Yeah. Did you do medical? What?
Scientific.
Well, yeah. Let's hear about yours.
So basically they cover everything, like can you falsify data, is that okay? But also like, did you give the appropriate people credit? Did you, if you do animal studies, did you make sure that you didn't do more than what was necessary to the animals so that the animals didn't suffer more than they needed? And I mean, it covers literally every aspect to how did you plan the experiment, how did you do the experiment, how did you present the results, and did you give credit and get permission from everybody that you needed to give credit to and get permission from?
Yeah. So the whole point of that ethics thing is teaching a person this is the right thing to do and the right way to do it. And people have to be told that, right?
Yeah.
Does anybody have business ethics under your belt? You got one, Rob?
Yeah, I did take one every year to maintain my license. And I'd always have high hopes, I think, going into it. And then it would always, it ended up being just, here's the laws that we have to follow to maintain a professional license. You can't accept fees for this. You're allowed to accept fees for that type of thing.
Yeah. How do you feel about this? When I think about ethics, I have ethics in a different sense. My ethics is like what we would call biblical ethics. And so a biblical ethics class is going to be things like Can a Christian go to war? Can a nation go to war? What about abortion? What about biomedical technologies? Like, what's the right thing to do in these different situations that we have opportunities to think about today? When I think about ethics, this is the way that I think about it, whether it's medical or business or science or whatever it is. Ethics is practice, right? I mean, think about it this way. Sometimes if you're sitting in a classroom, you're doing it because you have to get credit and the institution has to give you this class in order for you to graduate. But if it's actually a spot where you're learning and doing what you're supposed to be doing, ethics is practice. It's looking at a situation and saying, what would I do? What should I do? And you go through this all for the purpose of saying, when I'm confronted with the same thing, or at least a similar situation, it's not my very first time thinking about this. Like, I'm not just showing up my first day on the job saying, I don't know what to do. It's, I've already given it some thought and practiced mentally working through what's going on with this sort of a thing. And that leads me into our first couple passages here. Let's look at Matthew 26, first of all. With the problem of evil, I want to think about a couple biblical passages here that point us to this reality that we are called by God to be prepared. When we get to the 1 Peter example, the actual word prepared is used in this text. But we are not supposed to be people, to the extent that is within our control, who are taken off guard by something because we've never thought about it. And it hit me and it's like, oh no, never thought about that before. Let's read a couple of these. I'm going to ask for a couple readers. Matthew 26, verses 30 through 35. Would you read that one, please?
And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to him, You will all fall away because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. And Peter answered him, Though they fall away because of you, I will never fall away. Jesus said to him, Truly I tell you, this very night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same.
Yeah, Jesus looks out and he says, you're all going to fall away. And they say, that will never happen to me. And Peter specifically, like his words are specifically there. Everybody else will fall away. I will never deny you. And yet Jesus is saying to them in this situation, y'all better get yourself ready. Get ready, because it's coming and it's going to be hard, and every single one of you, you're going to fail and you're going to fall away. And the main point of this is not information for information's sake. It is tighten up your belt and get your seatbelt on and get ready for this thing. I don't know, exactly how Peter would have prepared. Well, I do. We're going to read that next in verses 38 to 41. I don't know how we would prepare for the reality that Jesus says, you're going to deny me and fall away. How do you get ready for that? But, that's what, like an ethics class, at least give it some thought. At least take it seriously. How about, would somebody read verses 38 to 41?
Then he said to them, My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me. And going a little further, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying,
How about verse 41? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. That one's powerful because he's getting onto the disciples and he's telling them, hey, Jesus knows something is about to happen. And what you need to be doing right now is praying and keeping your eyes open. Watch. Like you need to be praying right now. But what makes this passage so powerful to me is that Jesus himself is doing it. That Jesus saw fit to say, you know who needs to prepare for what's about to happen? Me. Jesus goes to the Father and he prays. And he's praying and he says, God, not what I want, but what you want. And I can only imagine in those words, it's like, those are real words, but you got to convince yourself that it's true. And Jesus is like, help me to not do the thing that I want to do because I do not want to get nailed to that cross. Help me to do what you want to do. He's preparing himself. Lastly, somebody, would you read 1 Peter 1 and verse 13, please? You can only read the first couple words. You'll see what they are.
Therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, prepare your minds for action. I'll stop here and give you an opportunity to mention something if you want, but I told you a lot of this is going to be stuff that I've said in the past, but this is what I think of more than anything else when it comes to this subject. It's basically what the entire police academy was. We're going to sit down in a classroom and we're going to learn from books. This is the law. This is what happened. This is what you're supposed to do. But more than that, we had practicals after every section. And it's basically a scenario. It's like role playing, where somebody comes up and they're pretending to do this and you're supposed to do this. And it's like, okay, when I'm confronted with this situation, how am I supposed to act? What am I supposed to do? And what do I do if this person does this? And what do I do if this person says this? And for the first 6 weeks after the police academy, you ride with an FTO. It's a field training officer. And that's basically, the call would come out. Boop, you get a tone on the radio. This is the address. This is the call. And from that point forward, my FTO, I'm thinking, I just got to know like how to get to there. I'm still trying to learn my streets. And he's like, where are we going? How are we going to get there? Which direction are you going to come from? What do we know about the area? What do we know about the call? Like, what kind of call is this? If we have to walk into the house, where are you going to go? Like, don't go to the kitchen. That's where all the weapons are. We're going to go here. What if it's a husband and a wife fighting? Who's going to separate the wife and go this way? Who's going to separate? And it's just the whole time running through the whole thing, which is 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 13. Prepare your minds for action. Make sure that you don't show up and you're like, duh, I've never thought about this before.
I think a way to describe that is to change the question when you get into the situation from why to what. That's being ready and being prepared. Don't look at trouble as, why is this happening? Look at it as, what would you have me learn from it, or what would you have me do? I think if the question gets changed and you're prepared, you're trained to have that response, then the outcome's going to be different.
Yeah, I like that a lot. From why to what. That could be a class title. From why to what. How about I write that down? Because I won't remember. I like it. Any others? What happens if a person waits until they're pregnant out of wedlock before they give any thought at all to whether or not abortion is a moral option? What happens if you've never thought about it? What happens if you've never read any of the scriptures in the Bible? Maybe you've heard about it because people talk about it, but I've never actually given any thought to it. and what it might say. And now I wake up one day and I say, oh, I'm in this situation. What happens if I do that and I've never given any thought to it? What's going to happen?
I can tell you firsthand, because I pregnant with Morgan out of wedlock, and immediately knew abortion was not anywhere in the conversation. But I had friends that were also in the same situation, and emotion will lead immediately, and any reasoning with them is hard to do because they're led by fear and emotion.
The emotion and the situation, like all of a sudden changes the whole thing. And if I don't have any kind of foundation for thinking or knowledge ahead of time, I'm not saying that all of a sudden the answer becomes easy, but it sure is easier to do what I want to do if I've not given any thought to what I should do, right? What happens if a person waits until they're diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer before they think about the biblical morality of euthanasia, assisted suicide? You get diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, maybe there's somebody who comes out of that, but not very many people, right? And so, Becky and I talk about this a lot, just because it's about 2.5, 3 years old, I don't know, from when Dad got his diagnosis. That was a long last year that Dad had. And the thing that Becky and I ask about a lot is, would I want to do that long last year? And I don't know, It's nice to be able to wrap your stuff up, but that was a long last year. And so it's like the option all of a sudden that is becoming a possibility for us, as a doctor says, it's not in our country yet that I know of, but like in Canada, there's a doctor who says, you know what? We could just go ahead and take care of this right now, and you don't have to do any of the suffering at all. What if you've never given any thought to that? That sounds real good. It sounds real good to me anyway. I don't want to do it. I don't want to go through that. That's something that some of us better be thinking about ahead of time, what are we going to do when we're, and if you do, I'm not criticizing you. I'm just telling you, after watching Dad for that last year, I'm not sure I want to do that. But what if I've never thought about it before? That's the problem.
It's now legal in Illinois.
Is it? I'm not surprised it's Illinois.
January 1st.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob. Do you know that's COVID? That's what happened with COVID. I think if we look back at COVID is something that we talk about right now because nobody had any idea. We were like, what do I do? Remember that? What am I supposed to do? Here's something for you. There are millions of ordinary Christians who hold that God is omnipotent, all-powerful, that God is perfectly good, that suffering abounds in the world. At many stages of their experience as Christians, they do not feel that there's a problem. That's most of this next, everything but the last sentence of this. Most of us are like, okay, I'm good. I'm all right with this. They have a small theological answer to satisfy them. Suffering is the result of sin. Free will means that God has to leave people to make their own mistakes. Heaven and hell will set the record straight. Maybe they have not really had to think about these matters much at all. They know God loves them. That's enough. Why bother your head about things that you cannot understand, let alone improve? And the reason why I put this quote up is because the last sentence. Many of us have lived this last sentence too many times. And then something takes place in their own life that jolts them to the core. The last sentence is what this class is. It's, hey, I never ask these questions, and even if I have the questions, I trust that God is good until I don't. And so that's what we're going to do. I've got this list here. I'm not going to read through this list. I'll give you the list if you want. There's no reason to say names, I don't think. There was about 4 years ago, somebody who worshiped with us in this congregation who moved away. And the reason why this is a conversation right now is most of you, I assume many of you, are familiar with this. He had a Category 4 spiritual come apart on the internet for everybody to see. And I screenshotted a lot of those posts and I wrote them down here. If God could just chill with the being wrathful, Jesus wouldn't even have had to die. What's worse, to make people incapable of sin or to let them sin and to go to hell? God is an abusive father. The choice is never relationship or no relationship. It's always relationship or burn in hell for eternity. He can't inspire someone to say God is love and overlook the fact that he destroyed the entire world and will do it again. Every single one of these things is problem of evil. Every single one fits into this category. The up and down of it is, if God is good, all-powerful, all-knowing, he cannot escape the responsibility placed on him for all of existence. Every genocide, rape, child abuse, and mental illness he saw, he knew about, and decided not to intervene in it. The fact that evil exists is due to him. He could solve it. He could stop the harm. He could stop the sin, but he doesn't. That's what it boils down to. So then what do you say? Like, what do you think about that? This is the end of it. My friends, this is no happy occasion for me in order for any two people to be able to relate to each other honestly. Honesty must be maintained. I am an atheist. There are a litany of reasons for this. In short, I do not have a positive view of God. The world I see does not seem consistent with the God described in the Bible. A God who cares supremely and has all power to take care of people does not fit with his actions or the way that the world is. I just throw that example out there because this class is not a hypothetical like, hey, this could happen. This is a real thing that every single one of us probably is going to face at some point, either ourselves or definitely with somebody else. I've got one more slide. Go ahead, Jake.
Your last point there, that this is something that's going to happen with us or someone else. I have a very close friend, had a very close friend, that we would have these kind of hypothetical conversations of what would you do in this situation? And being both of us kind of recently married, the conversation came up, it's like, what would you do if someone approached you and you were put in an uncomfortable situation? And I gave him my answer that was very thought out. I'm never entering that situation. Asked for his answer, and he's kind of beat around the bush, like, I don't really know what I would do. And as of last year, he's officially divorced. He lost his church, lost his wife, lost his sons, lost his job, and he's off the radar. I haven't heard him.
Yeah.
Because of that. He entered that situation because he did not prepare properly.
Yeah. Better get your mind right. Go ahead, Linda.
It seems like when we have a false ideology of what God is and who he is, then when something bad happens, that hurts our faith. For example, if you think, if I have enough faith and I pray hard enough, God will answer my prayer in the way I want, which is not true. And, if you don't understand that God can't be close to sin, he has to be separated from sin, then, you just don't understand the whole picture of how God works, and then something happens the way that you don't want it to, and you're not understanding that God is good when good things are happening, but God is still good when bad things are happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that I hope to take away from this class is to hear more of that. It's one thing for me to tell you something that I read in a book. It's another thing to hear it from a person who's done it. So I hope that you will participate. you can read these passages on your own if you'd like. But what I want you to remember as we move through this class is that it is not sinful or wrong or bad to ask hard questions. Why would God let this happen? That question is on the table. That is a biblical question that inspired writers ask. And so if you're like, ooh, I feel really guilty about this, read the Bible. Like, this is a biblical conversation that we need to have. And so that's what we're going to do for the next 3 months. Thank you for your participation in that. And next time, if you want to prepare for this, if you want to prepare for class on Wednesday, you should probably have already done it. Read Genesis 1 through 3. Like, where did it all start? We're just going to have to talk about where did it all start. I'll even tell you what I want to hammer in Genesis 1 through 3. It's easy enough to say that sin is the answer to the problem. What's hard is to acknowledge that my sin is a part of the problem. And so that's what we're going to do on Wednesday.